Let's stay in Canberra and catch up with Labor Senator Matt Thistlethwaite. You were a senator, of course. You're not any longer. Member for Kingston is Matt Thistlethwaite. Good to talk to you, Matt. Hell of a budget, hell of a lot of spending in there. Is there any bit of spending, any bit of government largesse there that Labor would put a line through, would not be spending?
Chris, the budget represents short-term gain, long-term pain. I think that the government's banking on a short-term bounce out of this, but Australians are going to be paying for it well into the future. Look, at the moment, Labor understands the need to support economic growth and increase expenditure, but it's what you spend it on. And our problem with this budget, Chris, is that it doesn't deal with the serious problems that Australia has structurally at the moment. Things like low wages growth, very low Labor productivity at the moment. The cost of housing. Not a week goes by where someone in my electorate doesn't complain to me about the cost of housing and how their kids are going to be able to afford to live in the city. None of these issues are dealt with in this budget. So although we see the need for expenditure, we think that it could have been better spent so that at the end of this, the budget forecast should be saying that wages are going to grow, that incomes are going to grow, and that you're going to get economic growth. But if you look at the government's forecasts, none of those things are growing.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's forecasts for still low wages growth, which is surprising, isn't it, given we've essentially got no immigration for a few years, and if the economy's going all right, wouldn't we expect to see some wage increases flow through?
Well, you would, and that's the point of the expenditure. You know, you're going to have expenditure up at around 26% of GDP at record highs. A lot of that's built on debt. Debt's going to go to $1 trillion. You want something to show out of that, Chris. You want a dividend at the end that supports economic growth and productivity into the future so that you can pay that debt off. The only way we're going to be able to pay that debt off is if the economy is growing into the future, and the budget's forecasts are for growth to remain flat and for income growth or wages to remain flat as well. So
I feel like
question really needs to be asked of the government.
I feel like I'm in topsy-turvy
What's the value we're getting out of it?
I think you're making a sensible argument, but it's the argument we used to hear from the coalition against Labor, so I'm slightly confused. What I will ask you just finally, though, is whether you agree with some of your colleagues and say that this looks like an election budget, and isn't that then an admission that it looks popular?
Well, it's definitely an election budget. That's why I said I think that they've structured it as short-term gain, but very much long-term pain. And we're going to be paying for it for a long time, but we're not going to have much to show for it.
It's going to make it hard for Labor to win the election.
Oh, look, no. I think Labor can still win the election because I think Labor can demonstrate that if you're going to have this expenditure, that you should be spending it on dealing with a lot of the issues that are problems in Australia at the moment. One thing that I'm quite passionate about, Chris, is high-speed rail. Trying to encourage people to move out of our cities and base themselves in rural and regional areas with proper transport links so that we can take a bit of the pressure off house prices in cities and that housing becomes a bit more affordable. Nothing for long-term vision, productivity-enhancing infrastructure like that in this budget.
Thanks for joining us, Matt. I appreciate it.
Cheers, mate.